Okay, welcome to everybody. Today at the European Parliament, the UNESCO Science Report towards 2030 has been presented. The UNESCO report shows how most countries, regardless the level of income, now see the research of the innovation as a key to fostering sustainable growth and furthering their development. I'm Alessio Pisano, and within the series of debate of the UNESCO office in Brussels organized at the European Parliament, I have a pleasure to introduce to you our guests. We have Mr. Paul Ruebig, member of the European Parliament and chair of the Science and Technology Options Assessment.
Hello.
Then Mr. Soete, Rector of the University of Maastricht in the Netherlands and co-author of the executive summary. And Mr. Vladimir Sucha, Director-General of the Joint Research Center at the European Commission.
Good afternoon.
So, Mr. Soete, in your opinion, what are the key takeaways of the science report?
Well, I think the first I would say is that there is a clear convergence, some convergence at the level of investments in research and development at the global level. There are countries such as China, of course, who have grown quite massively in terms of investment in research and development over the last 4 to 5 years. And if you look at this at the global level, that means that there is a convergence between North and South. But it's a very unequal convergence because there are many countries who, of course, have not converged to the levels of the high-income countries such as Europe. I think a second issue which I would like to emphasize is the openness. The world of science and research is open, not just in the scientific field. People publish together across the world in networks. Scientists are mobile, they move. PhD students are mobile. Education is becoming open, global. And I think the third issue is rather a concern. That is that as all countries converge, it seems that they all focus on the short-termism. And they all look at extracting value out of research in an immediate fashion in terms of getting commercial applications. So fundamental research, basic research is crucial for private research, but we shouldn't forget that, of course, fundamental basic research is crucial for our long-term goals and for the planet as a whole, and many of the challenges we face and we will face in the future.
Mr. Ruebig, in this context, what can the EU do to remain a leader, let's say, about research and innovation in the world?
In European Parliament, we are not only a legislative institution, we are also a kind of postgraduate university. And we know that the European Commission, together with the Joint Research Center, takes a lot of action to clarify a lot of issues where we have to make decisions. So STOA is the Scientific Technology Options Assessment of the European Parliament. We are working together with the 20 committees in the House, and we produce studies and briefings to get a better understanding on how to use technologies. What we do, we look on a certain problem, which technological options we can find around the world. So the Global Science Report is very important for us to look through the different chapters if we can find the right options for the European Union. And of course it's very clear that around the options we have to see which foresight strategy we can use in the social impact, the cultural impact, the economic impact, the environmental impact. So what we want to give to the public and of course to the decision-making level, options with foresight surrounding and the so-called silo and pipe strategy, that we break up the knowledge silos around the world, and the science report has brought this very good to the point, that we have now to connect it with pipes. We have to use this knowledge which the report brings to us, and I think through the new models of analytics and algorithm and search machines, we can quantify what is flowing in the pipes. We can see the quantity, we can see the quality, we can see which silo is connected which one. And I think what's much more important is to see who is not connected. And the world, at least, is not very well connected. So what a World Science Report gives us is a better overview with whom we can act and why we should act.
Mr. Sucha, on the side of the Commission, what are the challenges associated with feeding research into policy making?
Well, first, I think that this World Science Report is about all science, so then the science is not only for policy, but it's a small part where we apply the scientific knowledge into policy making. And if you look at this specific niche or this specific issue, which actually Joint Research Center is dealing with, we see the challenges which can be somehow summarized as TTFF principle. And this TTFF principle means trust, timing, form and format. I think that there must be, first of all, trust between science and policymakers. So if you don't have a trust between these two, so it's very difficult that the flow of information and knowledge is going on. Then timing, there's another T, is that you should not come with your scientific support when the decision is taken. So it should come far before. Then the format is important. That format should not be, the science, World Science Report is almost 6 kilograms, as Flavia Schlegel said, but this is exactly what we should reduce. I think that we should have the reports for policymakers in a form of briefings, short messages in quite clear and concise language. And then the format is not only reports, we should be engaging in interaction. I think that scientists should understand better what are the challenges of policymaking, and policymakers should understand better what are the challenges of the science, and then we can provide a good support. So then TTFF is the answer.
Mr. Soete, you have already said that there is a global trend of investing more and more in R&D. I would like to ask you, what about developing countries such as the African ones? How do you explain that even there are countries that are trying today to do their best in investing in research and innovation?
Well, I think the low-income countries, and in particular the African countries, are of course feeding to some extent the need for investments in innovation and research on a day-to-day basis. I think the challenges they are confronted with, often which are global in nature, but they are the first at the moment which are suffering from it. And I'm talking about climate change, of course, but I'm also talking about food security, you're talking about energy. So in many of these areas, you see that there is on the one hand a line that innovation is becoming across the board, and innovation is something where I would say there is no more distinction between the north and the south or the east and the west. But innovation is something which is much more sometimes based on existing research, it's sometimes based on reusage of knowledge, and sometimes it's extremely original. So we have all kinds of forms of innovation which go across the income spectrum. Low income innovations, innovations which are really based on new business models. Think of M-Pesa, many other things which are developed first in the African context because you lack actually the physical infrastructure in terms of telecoms. So I think this is important to realize that this innovation notion is something which is becoming much more richer and much more diversified than just the notion of research. At the same time, there is also within the research concept a pretty broad spectrum of research. There is the fundamental research carried out at CERN or in interaction with extremely expensive machinery, which is, say, frontier research, and that, of course, very little of that kind of research is carried out in Africa. But nevertheless, you have a lot of applied research and research which feeds back into much more fundamental research, which is based on uses, and that can be in health areas, in the medical areas, where your different patients provide you a tremendous amount of information which feeds back into the diversity of research activities in the health sector. So I think there is a richness there which can explain why both in agriculture, in the health sector, in molecular biology, in many other areas, African countries are investing in research. And I think there is, of course, finally the political consideration that, of course, many African countries consider the long term and getting into a development mode that from that perspective, research and innovation are absolutely crucial.
I think this is important what Luke is saying, to look at the innovation from this diversity perspective, because what we consider as innovation, technological innovation in Europe or in the United States, let's say in agriculture and in health, is something completely different in Africa. So I think that we could have different perspectives in this respect, and this is exactly what we need. We need to have specificities in innovative ideas and innovative approaches to solve the global problems and the problems of different parts of the world. And I think this is very, very important and quite a strong message that if we want to achieve sustainable development goals, if we want to help, for example, in particular Africa, we all need to have a concerted effort to boost research and innovation, but not at the global level, but just to solve the particular problems of different parts of Africa, because it's very different. There are different climates, there are different natural conditions, different soils. So there are different challenges which needs to be tackled, as a whole, as a global scientific community.
And what is doing the Joint Research Center to this extent?
To this extent, we have a lot of activities, in particular in Africa. We just recently got the thanking letter from UNICEF that we were able to increase to the 100% from 25-30% of the success rate of drills for the drinking water to the 100%. So every drill is successfully giving the water. But, we produced recently a Soil Atlas of Africa, which is a big encyclopedia of all types of soil, which is extremely important for that purpose. We produced the Atlas of Renewable Energies in Africa. So we are using European satellites, which are supported by the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European Union, to observe the Earth, and especially with the focus on Africa, on desertification, on water scarcity, etc. So I think that there is a big effort in Africa and with Africa. And actually this year, in end of August, we are upgrading this. So with the capacity building, we will be hosting 50 African scientists and 50 African policymakers in our site in north of Italy, in Ispra, exactly to focus and transfer the knowledge. How can science support policymaking in the field of water, energy and food, which are crucial elements of the development?
Mr. Ruebig, talking about support, I see that the UNESCO science report writes that only 33% of scientists are actually women. Mm-hmm. What are the European institutions doing to foster gender equality in research and development?
I think the main problem is that men doesn't need so much flexibilities in women. So I think what we have to offer to women is more flexibility, and that could lead to a certain kind of exchange program. I think if we look to the World Science report, we have a lot of different approaches around the world, and we have to look for incentives for women to be more engaged in the scientific field. Especially in the MINT areas, we have a lot of new adventures, to say so. We are now changing from the real world or mirroring the real world into the virtual world. So we have now to learn together with our children how we can move ourselves in the virtual world, how can we take care on our privacy, in which area do we have to have more transparency, how can we follow our data? It's from a family business. How can we get this approach into the virtual world? And that's where we work now with a lot of new structures. We use social media to connect each other. That's for women much more important, because they also can do some work from at home. Especially in the science field, you must not sit in the laboratory all day long. And also we try that they can link and stay with their families. So I think if we look to Africa, that a lot of young people are born, we should look especially to the young people. So what can we do with early performers? How can we integrate them into exchange programs? Madame Curie program, Erasmus for young entrepreneurs, a lot of programs which we have in European Union, which I can see could be also work in other regions of this world, and that's where European Parliament puts a lot of effort into it.
Mr. Soete, do you want to add anything about this issue on the academic point of view? What do women scientists need?
Well, I think this is one of the most difficult and painstaking problems we face. And I'm saying this as somebody from the Netherlands, where you would imagine that gender equality would be the norm. And we find that in our own universities, we have tremendous difficulties in terms of filling simply a normal gender, or finding a normal gender balance, whether you talk at the level of university management, whether you talk at the level of deans of a faculty, whether you talk at the level of rectors, we are all sitting here are men, whether you talk at the level of professors. And I think seriously there is a major challenge there. I know that back home, my Minister of Education and Science has made this as one of her priorities. You see, this is a hard nut to crack, and I don't think so. What happens in developing countries, I've often said that maybe one of the lasting elements of communism, of the socialist planned regimes we had, one of the lasting elements might well be that there was gender equality at the level of sciences. Unfortunately, when you see both in Russia and many other countries, once the system was removed and entered into our system, you see how even there the gender equality in the field of sciences is being reduced. If I would say the difference between China and Japan today is still that there are far more women in sciences than in Japan. And so I think this is where, how can we get back into a system that we, respecting of course the choices, there might be very different choices between genders in terms of the areas of the social sciences or medical or other caring sciences, but still respecting these choices, we enter into a much more gender balanced system in terms of particularly positions which carry responsibilities, such as the professors as mentors of their PhD students, postdocs, in terms of the deans of faculties, the rectors of the managers of universities. I think this is a major challenge also for Europe.
Well, I would probably not look into the communist regimes as a good example. You know, I spent a good part of my life under the communist regime. I can tell you that
the only one thing.
This all academicians, all hierarchy was only male. I don't think that it's obviously that was mostly in you know, you had the chauffeurs and the miners, they were pushing women just to show this, but it was just ideology. But in reality, if you look at all these executive bodies of Communist Party, you just have one woman there sitting as an ornament, not as a real commitment. But I think this is an issue. And I found myself in our own organization that we are lagging behind even in the Joint Research Center, behind, I would say, the average of Europe. And I think that it's a very slow process. It's a process of understanding our own cognitive processes, how we do things. And there is probably in our cognitive biases that how we look at things, that there is something which is embedded there, which is preventing us to moving, because we are talking about it for quite a long time. So now we are experimenting with determination. So we have in our own organization our own program, which started last September, and I hope that if we in 1 or 2 or 3 years we will evaluate that, we will get some better results, because we are targeting really through the talent management, through the process, this issue. And I think that that can be one lesson which we can offer eventually. But we have a good successes. One success is CERN. Another success which I experienced is CNRS in France. It's absolutely impressive. We invited them because we wanted to learn from them, and there are many organizations in Europe where this is working. So then we just need to learn better how to do this job.
So let's hope that one day we will get to a real gender equality in all Europe, starting from Brussels.
You know, in Oman they have it up till now. They have a quota of 50%, but they do it in another way. not more than 50% of women are allowed to not discriminate men. So we see it's a big difference in this world, and we try to do it better.
It's a balance. So thanks very much. Thanks very much to all of you. Of course, we look forward to pursuing progress in science through research and innovation to foster sustainable development in all the world. Thanks to our guests, and thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.